So yeah, welcome to this week's episode of Let's Play. And I thought maybe a good thing to talk about, because we do a lot of work with it, would be role-playing games. Or not even role-playing, just games specifically, but role-playing in general. There's a ton of games out there that make use of role-playing for kids and teens and adults. But I even kind of grabbed some kind of unorthodox ones where if you are interested in role-playing with your kids, that you could kind of take on kind of a mini role-playing session to exercise that muscle. But I think what I was going to say is that for those of you who don't know, I'm Kristen Kalina. I'm the owner of Mastermind Adventures. This is Ali Salentic. She is the Master of Lore. And this is Tom. He's our werewolf. And and Tom does a lot of things. He teaches a bunch of different classes for kids. He runs Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder Society and Lego Robotics and
Code Logic
and tons of other things.
Pretty much everything.
All kinds. Well, a lot of things for sure. So, and of course, we always pull him in when we need somebody to
act as a wolf.
Let the kids beat him up, and he's a really good sport about that. I was going to say maybe kind of give people an overview of the origins of role-playing games, where they kind of started. And I know a little bit, but knowing that Tom and Ali are kind of the encyclopedia of knowledge about games, that they might be able to add a little bit more. So role-playing games, and what people usually think now when we talk about tabletop role-playing games is Dungeons and Dragons, which actually got its start in the 60s or 70s.
76.
76, there you go. See, encyclopedia, what did I tell you? And it was a man named Gary Gygax, right, who started, and it was really a inspiration off of war games, right?
Yeah. So it started off of a game called Chainmail, which was a tabletop miniatures war game. And then what ended up happening was a lot of people, at least this is the story I heard, is a lot of people were like, hey, like, wouldn't it be cool if, like, instead of playing as like a bunch of armies, I actually got to play my human general named Leonidas, who was leading like so many people. And Gary Gygax was like, I can come up with the rules for it. And then they ended up just slowly evolving into what became D&D, and then AD&D, and then so on and so on.
So I am not checking out and being on my phone. I'm actually looking for comments, because I see some of you are commenting. So just so that you know, I'm not being rude. I know it kind of looks like I am. I don't know why it's not the live. Oh, there it is. Okay, there it is. Okay. Oh, good. Mom says yes, she can definitely hear. Okay. I'm going to just turn down the volume. Okay. All right. So that is the history of where kind of the modern obsession with role-playing games began. They had a huge surge in the early 80s, which is when I first started playing role-playing games. I actually was probably 8, and I had a friend. Her name was Kristen also, and she was from, her family was from Norway.
Oh, that's awesome.
And her older brother, Jeff, was a couple years older than my older brother, Patrick, and he was the dungeon master. And it was like the most life-changing experience at the time, you know, because before that, as a kid growing up in the 80s, if we had a summer break or any kind of school break, we were playing Monopoly, you know, and which is also awesome. You know, I'm still a fan of Monopoly. But we were playing card games. We were playing Spoons was a huge card game that we absolutely loved. Or we were playing Crazy Eights. We were swimming a lot because I was out in Phoenix at the time. But something like this that was so left of center for me at the time, and being kind of, you know, attracted to things that are dramatic and, you know, immersive, it really just was almost like life-changing. I was like, what? I can play this magical, powerful creature.
I got into it when I was in college, so I'm kind of a late bloomer to the whole like RPG thing, but I've always been like the person who was like out in the woods, like talking to fairies and like making up stories, like just like all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So we used to, in elementary school, me and my friends used to play I forget what we called it. I think it was like make-believe stories or something like that, but like up to like 5th or 6th grade, we were like out in the like making up all of these stories, and someone would have to play like the like the witch.
You were LARPing.
Yeah, we were LARPing in like elementary school, and I had no idea what that was.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
LARPing, but
like I was the oldest of like my, like there's like a 7-year gap between me and the next highest cousin,
Yeah.
and like I wasn't around them, so I was like
Yeah.
the oldest one,
Yeah.
so I didn't have like an older person to introduce it to me. So when I got to college,
Nor would they have? I'm trying to. Who would that have been? Amy? No.
Yeah.
Jimmy.
Jimmy, Amy, or like Randy, like.
Oh no.
We're all
Randy's my
related if you
age.
can't tell, by the way.
Yeah.
But like
Wow,
those are the
dispersed
cousins. I
that
didn't
last
see
week.
you a whole lot because
Well,
you
I was
were
in Arizona.
Yeah, so like
no, there was no one for her. Poor thing.
yeah, I was all alone.
She was the oldest.
So, but like I played a lot of video games, obviously, because I'm a nerd. So when I was in college, my roommate was like, "Hey, do you guys want to try playing Dungeons and Dragons? 3rd edition just came out." And I was like, I have no idea what that is, but I am so into it. Like, let's do it. And it was life changing. Like,
Yeah.
I started out as like kind of like a mousy like person who didn't want to talk to anyone. I was
Right.
super shy,
Yep.
and now like I'm so much better at it because like
Yeah.
playing a charismatic character makes you like
Yeah.
want to do that.
We
And
actually
playing
share that in common. People often think we're extroverts. We're not.
no,
We're
no.
neither of us.
I'm the extrovert.
Yes,
actually.
Tom. You're looking for an extrovert. He's your man.
Yes.
Hi.
Please.
So,
Oh, I was-
but yeah, it does.
Real quick.
And so talk about that a little bit as being somebody who is super introverted, because I'm sure a lot of you parents have kids who do, who are kind of quiet or shy, and you're looking for
Like to
ways for
read.
them to, kind of come out of their shell. So talk about that a little bit. What was that experience like for you?
It was so I played with a group of my first game group was kind of unconventional because it was all girls,
Yeah.
which is not it even at that time, like early 2000s. That wasn't happening. Most D&D groups were like very like man heavy with like an occasional like wife or girlfriend thrown in when they got bored.
Right.
So, but it was actually kind of a hostile kind of. I love to tell the story of like me and my two friends walked into our local game store, and the entire place went silent because we had 3 girls had just walked in, and we were just like talking. I was literally looking for like the new D&D book, and everyone was like, "What are they doing in here?
Yeah.
Who are they?
Yeah.
Like they're girls, and like they didn't swear around us, and like they were like just stare. It was weird. It was very weird. Wasn't like super hostile, but it was very like
Uncomfortable.
off-putting. Yeah.
I was gonna
And
say jarring.
And it was only like after that I came into groups that had like either an equal number or more like men than women. So my first gaming like experience was very unconventional, and I like to think it was really awesome because like we played it was a 3-person game, so we had a GM and 2 players, so we really like got into like character, and we sometimes spent entire games like not rolling dice or anything like that. So it was a lot of like getting into character and talking as your character and thinking about what they do in their lives and their their likes and their dislikes and their favorite food and like their families and their backstories. And I wrote a ton of like fan fiction just about this setting because I was again a nerd. So just a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think role playing is a lot like improv. You have to think on your feet. You have to kind of get into the feeling of the character and then talk as that character. So you have to kind of have the mindset of being a person like that. And my first character was a bard, that's in D&D, that should be, if people know what D&D is, you should know what kind of character that is. She's a very typical bard. But she was very charismatic. She loved like the spotlight.
But if they don't,
Okay, if they don't, a bard is a magical musician, basically. Not all of them are musicians, but most of them are. And they're
Jack's of all
performers, and they use magic to like enhance their performance, and they use performance to enhance their magic. So they do a lot of like buff spells, and which are spells that like enhance people or they debilitate other people. They're jacks of all trades. They can heal pretty good. They can buff pretty good. They can attack pretty good, but they're not the greatest at everything. So they're kind of like they're like a character that you play after you have like the big 4 of like fighter, rogue, cleric, and wizard. So you can add a bard to that, and they basically enhance everyone else because they can sing songs and like give people bonuses and stuff like that.
support.
They're a support class. Which as soon as I saw that, I was like, that's what I want to play. Like, I love bards. So my character she was very charismatic, and she loved to perform. And I was playing with someone who was playing a kind of a reserved character, which was very in character for her at the time. So my character was forced to take the lead a lot and like chase after plot hooks and interact with everyone and make friends with everyone because the other person was kind of not as friendly as I was. And so we had this whole, like, there was a lot of stuff going on, and I love like the drama and the romance and, you know, like the just like the melodrama of role-playing games is kind of my favorite thing. So so a lot of that like kind of forced me to, you know, be a little more confident and say like, okay, well, like this character, I'm getting into character, and you know, she loves to perform, and I don't really like being in the spotlight. I love like singing and stuff like that, but what do I do? So I started like writing my own songs and performing them for the group, which led me to like
time imagining you actually doing that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I don't.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I used to take like old songs and I would like rewrite the lyrics and then I would sing them.
Awesome.
It was great. But like we started, you know, it kind of formed us as a bond between like the three of us as friends. And it started like I started wanting to go out more and meet new people and use those, like get into character and be like, well, I'm really nervous right now, but like, what would my character do?
Mm.
How would she deal with this? And I would say, okay, you know what? She would go in and she would say, I don't care what you think about me. Like, I'm going to be me and I'm going to do what I want. And that's kind of how I started to be. And I mean, I'm still kind of introverted and shy, and I still don't really like, you know, I don't like, you know, talking on the phone or doing stuff like that. But I think that I'm really good at like speaking now. I can talk to people. I'm not afraid to like be on Facebook Live.
Right.
It doesn't like send me into like, oh my God, I can't talk to anyone.
Right.
I'm good at like, I'm really good at bullshitting. Like, you know, I can come up with stuff on the fly.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that role playing in general will teach you.
Oh, yeah.
But role playing a character that is very like the opposite of you
Right.
will give you a little bit. It helps you kind of understand the qualities of those kind of people, I think.
Right.
So
Yeah. And you and I are similar in that we would prefer not to take the lead,
Yeah.
but if we need to
But,
take the lead,
yeah,
we're like,
we're
I'm
kind
on
of
it.
we're forced into that.
We're
Yeah.
doing it.
It actually became a joke in my group that I was always the leader
Yeah.
because everyone else was like, nah, we'll just sit here. And I was like, we have to get stuff done. Like, we have a quest. Wait, you know what? You guys just stay here. I'm just going to go over and do this thing.
You know,
and
having role played with you, I can't imagine you as anything but the leader because of like the characters that you play in my
but
games.
that's how it
But, yeah.
happens.
So
I
how
mean,
many years has it been since you started?
18.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
18.
Amazing.
I think I might have you beat actually.
You probably do. You started a little earlier.
Yeah, I started. So my introduction to role playing was just before high school because like I've always been a nerd in like a kind of non-nerdy family. So like I've always had to like kind of like go out and find my nerd niche,
Your
as it
tribe.
were. Exactly. So like I'd always been vaguely aware of Dungeons and Dragons and like that it was like this weird game that like nerds played, and I was like, I want to do that. So when I went to a summer camp and they offered a D&D like course, which all it was buy the book, buy the dice, we'll run a game for you. Like I sat down, I was like, I made my character. He's a wizard. He was probably the worst made wizard in like the history of Dungeons and Dragons, but it's fine. I sat down, and then the GM was like, "Oh yeah, we're actually ending this session. Like we're ending the game like this week." And I'm like, "Oh, cool!" So I got to play like one day of combat was my introduction
Yeah.
to D&D, and then like you know I went into high school, made a couple of friends, and actually our group was also weird because it was 2 girls, 3 guys, and a GM,
Yeah.
and that was
Very unusual.
yeah. And then from there, it just kind of like everything kept falling apart every time like I would try to play until I hit college. And then a friend of mine was like, we should play D&D. And I'm like, oh, God, like this friendship's not going to last then because that's what happened last
Death
time.
knell.
Yeah, I'm having like Vietnam flashbacks.
Yeah.
And then actually I ended up meeting a lot of cool people like through this. And then they introduced me to other games. And then I went into LARPing like almost immediately. Too, because
So
they were
LARPing is live action role play,
Yep.
and in mastermind terms, that's what we would call adventure games or
Mhm.
live action games.
Mhm.
And it takes the tabletop part of role playing to the real world. So you are actually physically playing a character. You are you can do the same kind of character development that you would do on a tabletop, and then you actually have to physically interact with other people.
Yep. It also, what it does is it removes the dice and makes the physical actions that you do as your character kind of the mode of doing those actions. So But yeah, I went into that like almost immediately. Like a friend of mine was like, "Would you like to LARP?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is, but let's do it."
Yeah.
And then I spent the next like 3 years dressing up as a vampire on weekends, and,
Yeah.
like, you know, trying to destroy other vampires because they were too edgy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was kind of my trajectory into it. Was like I kind of always vaguely knew I wanted to do it. And one of the cool things for me, and like you can always tell, like there's always once you hit a certain point, role players will do this where like you'll ask them a question, they'll give you like an answer immediately and stop and just be like, I didn't know that about this character. Like that's always my favorite bit is like when the character kind of takes over with a life of its own.
So this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I was running this kind of homebrew space opera game once, and when we were like talking, there were probably 7 or 8 people in this game, so that's a lot. Usually most role-playing games are like 4 to 5 people with a GM. This was a big group of people, and a lot of people wanted to play it. So I was like, okay, I'll take everyone that can fit into it. So it was a lot, and it was a little bit stressful. But we basically everyone made their characters, and we were kind of sitting around, and they were like, okay, so like, are you going to tell us about the game? And I was like, okay. And I started flipping through this little character. Well, it wasn't little. It was like 160 questions. It was a character questionnaire, and it's supposed to be there to like help you figure out your character. And they had a lot of like interesting, like, you know, where were you born? Do you have any nicknames? Stuff like that. But it had like some interesting questions. So I just started reading through it and like asking questions of people. So I went around the room and I was like, okay, you like, tell me about your parents. And he would tell me about his parents. And then I'd be like, what's your favorite color? And he'd tell me like that. And I'd be like, why? And then I asked, like, the last question I asked was, do you believe in destiny? And he was like, oh, like, I don't know. And he, like, thought about it for a second. He was like, yes, I do. I do believe in destiny. And I was like, great. And I moved on to the next person. And, like, everyone, I asked different questions of everyone. Sometimes I repeated them. But it was basically a way to, like, force them to kind of think about that kind of stuff. And I remember asking one of the guys, are you ticklish? And he was like, why are you asking? And I was like, that's exactly the kind of like thing, because he was playing kind of like a Playboy guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's perfect. And I asked, do you believe in destiny to all of them? And they were just like, by the end, they were like, oh my God, like that was so cool.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? I'm like, because these are the questions I ask myself about my characters. Mm-hmm. And I want this to be a very real game. I wanted it to feel like the characters to be very real, not just like, you know, caricatures of, you know, your typical like space, you know, the captain and the rebellious teenager and the magical person, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it was like, it's still to this day is like one of my favorite ways to start a game, to just be like, okay, like I'm just going to ask you some questions, just answer them as your character and just go into it. And it was like the change that went around the room as like everyone, because no one knew what I was doing at first. I was just asking them questions. And then the change as like everyone started to kind of like sit differently and like really think about things and like do the mannerisms of their character was just like the coolest thing, because you're getting into character and you're like thinking as them, and that makes you project as them.
Yeah.
Kind of like acting, like method acting, you know, you have to kind of think about the character as a whole rather than just what they're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think it's
no, I think that, and I think what we've seen with working with kids who, and introducing them oftentimes to these types of activities is that they get it immediately.
Yeah.
You know, I think
it's very simple.
I think
for a kid to get just.
It's a natural kind of, it's not even a leap for kids. Some of them, if they're a little bit older, might, but we haven't actually encountered that. I was going to say some kids might feel like, oh, this is weird, or this is awkward, but we actually haven't encountered that.
Yeah.
And we've been doing this for a few years now, and we've been doing it with the public at large. Like we'll go to a library somewhere and say, okay, now everybody here, we're going to do Camp Half-Blood, or we're going to do Harry Potter. And, you know, giving kids the space to become a character and play a character really resonates with them. I mean, they're really, really into it.
I was just going to say, we actually have had something like that, not with our adventure programs, but with some of our other programs where actually for Citizens, when we did the Harry Potter stuff, at least one kid there was like, this isn't magic.
Oh, there's
This
always
isn't
one,
real.
yeah.
There's always one. Always
Yeah,
one.
always one.
But they're like, this isn't real. This isn't magic. Like all of this
Prove
is.
to us that this is magic. Do a magic spell.
And the funny thing is that rather than like kind of give in and like kind of do that, what we like, Ali and I will tap into our kind of GMing and role playing stuff, and we just kind of just spout off answers for them like very, very quickly and with kind of this natural internal consistency. And by the end of it, they're like, this is all magic. I'm a wizard
those
now.
kids are always by the end the ones who buy into it the most.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they basically in their mind like justified all of their questions.
Yep.
They've
Right.
said, "Oh no, they gave me answers to all these things, so they
Right.
have to be real." And
Right.
it's
Yeah.
really
And I
really
think
cool.
that I think too with kids, it's usually when they're just about the age of not sure whether or not Santa is a thing.
Which
So-
he is, by the way.
Of course he's.
Yes.
Of course, Santa's real. But there's always that kind of age where they start to doubt and they start to. They're not sure. They're trying on whether or not it's okay to still believe in magic.
Yeah.
But by and large, the kids are into it. And the
Oh, yeah.
other thing that I know I was worried about when we first started doing these types of role playing games, especially live action role playing games with kids, was if they were going to understand the game mechanics. We've got some very simple game mechanics that we use because we don't want it to be too complicated for kids to be able to get into and understand. But I was proven totally wrong on that because I was like, oh, I don't know, guys. I don't know if they're going to get this. Hey, Pokemon. And I mean, it was seamless, right? I mean, do you remember the first Camp Halfwood that we did at a library?
Oh my God, yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, this might be too complicated. We're giving them like, oh, you have a power now. Is this going to be,
Yeah.
So
my favorite example of that is the last the first time we did the Mastermind LARP system, and we were sitting there like the day before, just like, is this too much? Like we think everyone gets it, but like, is this going to be too much? And then kids walked up to us and they were like, so this is my build. I'm going to spend all of this, and then my next XP is going to go toward this. And we're like, oh, you cracked everything. You just broke the game in two.
Yeah.
Go with it.
Which is great because it gives them a sense of ownership too, I think. And they, but these kids, they've grown up playing games.
Yeah.
So they've grown up with choosing attributes for their character and understanding that whole system of mechanics where they can build stuff. So maybe we can talk about, for people who are just starting out, if you think that your kids might be interested in role playing, I'm gonna start with some of the more obscure stuff that you might be able to.
That's my favorite stuff.
Because
What are you
that's
talking about there,
fun.
nominee?
Yeah.
More obscure stuff that is easy to. Yeah, it is great training for the real world. That's one of the comments. There's some games that are just games. They're not even role playing games, but they have role playing aspects to them. And if you want your kids to, or even you, if you're like, because here's the thing, guys, we don't play enough. I'm coming to this realization for myself. Like, I don't get enough time to do things that I think are fun. I'm constantly working. I'm constantly figuring out like what's next or what has to happen, or planning something new, or taking care of the cleaning and the cooking and the family whatevers. And, play with your kids if you can. I think that, I've been reading a lot of articles and books about, because of this group, I'm trying to really see what are the experts saying, what do they think is out there. And I think that some of the problem with kids being on video games a lot is that we want them to be able to play by themselves, right? And we don't want them to get bored because then they're bothering us. And so the video game is a quick and easy way to get them occupied into something, and they're not going to bother you. And then you start to worry, like, are they doing this too much? But it's good for everybody to take a break. It's good for everybody to, play together if you can find a game that you can play together. So here are some great suggestions. I'm going to start with Fun Employed.
Oh,
That's a fun one.
You want to talk about it?
Well, do you want to start?
Sure. Okay. So Fun Employed.
We're going to just pass it around and not tell you anything about it.
It's a great game. That's it.
It is a great game. If you've ever played anything like Apples to Apples or Cards Against Humanity, which is kind of the adult version of that, Fun Employed is kind of a little bit like that. You get a bunch of cards. There's one person who's kind of judging each round. Except Fun Employed, is about interviewing for a job with specific. So the person who's interviewing pulls these cards, and they're they're things that they have to ask about. They're okay, for this job I need like a qualified professional who's like a rat person and likes to cook, something like that. And so they're asking these questions, and the person who's interviewing everyone is interviewing for the same job. They want to get the job. Whoever gets the job wins. But they also have strange quirks about them.
Yeah.
And they have to find a way to like bring them into the conversation without being just like, like I have three arms, and they're ridiculous, like silly things. You have to talk in like silly accents.
Yeah, I was about to say, I remember.
You really have to like build a character around these little traits that you have. And it's just really, really funny.
Yeah.
So like the example in the back is these are the qualifications. Or you're hungover. You have 50 cats. You have box wine is one of them, and then a flaming sword to get the job drag queen.
See, I wasn't actually going to go with like I have 50 cats. I was going to go I am 50 cats in a human suit.
Yeah,
like, that's
right.
what I would.
That's so much better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the fun of Fun Employed.
Yeah.
It says 18 plus, but I think you could probably, if you look
with
for
any kind of teenager.
Yeah, if you look
Yeah.
for like the ones that maybe are not quite so risque, you could have some fun with it.
We
Or
played
even
that
middle
with
schoolers.
Yeah, we played that with some of the teens like back here, like
Yeah.
the 13.
Oh yeah, they
14
play
-year-olds.
like 10-person games.
They
love
love
this
this
game.
game. It's really funny, and some of them are like absolutely out there. You're like, I'm 50 cats in a human suit.
Yeah,
but like
yeah.
one of them is like, I have a tentacle and I speak in a pirate accent.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very funny.
Great fun.
Oh, yeah.
Another game that's kind of like that we just picked up, and it was an independent, and I think it's in the back somewhere because we just went on vacation. I stole a bunch of stuff from the game lounge. But another game that's kind of like that's kind of in the same vein is called Smack Talk Showdown. And we haven't played that yet, but I watched the
that
kids play
sounds
while we were
amazing,
on
though.
vacation. So it's the same type of premise where there's a judge and there's two people who are playing against each other. They're both playing promoters for wrestling.
Oh my god.
And they have certain parameters, and each of them I think has a different parameter. And thank you, sir. And so they each have a different challenge that they have to overcome, but they're fighting for the same job. So really, really, really fun. I'll put the link to Smack Talk Showdown. I'll put the link for all of these in the comments later, so that you guys can find them if you're looking for them. So why don't you talk about Munchkin, Thomas?
Okay. Dang, I was hoping you were reaching for the other one. So Munchkin is kind of fun. This is kind of a role-playing light.
It is. It's a parody on like Dungeons and Dragons.
So for those of you that don't get the joke, Munchkin is also the term for somebody who uses game mechanics and rules to break their character and make it more powerful than anybody else at the table. Yeah. So already it's a joke. But this is a great little card game where it kind of parrots back and satires the entire kind of game loop of kind of the hack and slash adventure games of role playing, where you kick in the door. Is there a monster? I kill it. If there isn't, I loot the room and then move on to the next room. Kind of the quintessential dungeon crawl of most RPGs. But this one is great because it takes that entire loop and then just puts a really kind of hilarious spin on it. Like, for example, you start off as a level 1 human with no class, which I find is a hilarious sentence to say.
That's very funny.
And then when you pick up loot cards, you can get classes, you can get races.
You can change your gender.
Yeah, you can get like gender change curses. You can do all kinds of things.
Yeah, and then also there's a lot of references in here that are more funny when you start playing role-playing games.
Yeah.
Like the gazebo is a monster, which we find hilarious. A lot of you that don't role play have no idea why that's so funny.
Every role player will kind of laugh a little bit when you hear the word gazebo.
Yeah,
or the grassy knoll.
Yeah, there's the grassy knoll, which is a large grassy like wolf creature. Actually, I think in this one.
Knolls
yeah,
are
hyenas. Sorry, my bad. And then there's the 6,582 goblins.
Yeah.
Which anybody who's ever GM'd and had to make an XP encounter for a specific challenge rating knows that sometimes you just need to throw in 6,825 goblins.
Yeah.
So how would you role play with this?
So one of the things I would do is I would say like make a character that's just not yourself and just do everything with that character because there's a lot of opportunities to talk to other people at the table and kind of
like negotiate. Like
there's a huge
part of it is that like you can, as a player, if someone's fighting a monster, you can make that monster more difficult for them. And when you get to higher levels, you want to kill someone so they go back down to like level 1 because once you hit level 10, you won the game.
Yeah.
So you're trying to like stop people from gaining levels while you're also gaining as many levels as you can.
This is a very
There's
it's a very adversarial game.
It is.
You're trying to kill everybody at the table, while at the same time get as many of them to help you as you can.
Yeah, because if someone like someone could help you, and they don't get any XP, but they could be like, well, I want the treasure.
Well, unless they're an elf.
Well, elves, if they help someone, they gain a level 2, which is they'll usually be like, I'll help you for nothing, and you're like, I really need you to help me, but do I want to give you a level like.
Right.
Ooh, where's the balance there?
And you can kind of have house rules for it too.
Yeah,
I know my kids started playing this when they were middle school aged. But there's some really good life lessons in that. Like if you really backstab your friends, nobody's going to want to play with you.
Yeah.
Nobody's, they'll start teaming up against you. So there's some really good just life lessons about, social skills and how to negotiate through your way through life, because if you're the underdog, you might end up with a bunch of people trying to help you get levels so that you can win against somebody who's being a total jerk.
It's very funny.
But yeah, it's kind of quirky. The art in it is also really fun and funny, and
and they've got a gazillion different skins for this.
You can play Munchkin in any.
They also have like 6 different expansions for this as well.
For addition, like original Munchkin has like 12 expansions.
Yeah.
And now they're starting to do expansions for some of the other like versions of it. But
they also have a tabletop version that we have here at the store that has a modular board that you put together.
Yeah, which is really really
cool.
interesting. It actually builds the dungeon as you're going through it.
This also has to come full circle. This has a rules light RPG to go with it as well.
Yes, it does. Yeah, so you can actually.
It's actually hilarious.
There's I know in 3rd edition they actually printed supplements that you could put like the Duck of Doom.
Yes.
Which is a duck that sits on your head so you can't wear a hat.
Yeah.
It's a curse.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Is that the Duck of Doom?
Yeah, the Duck of Doom is the one that sits on your head.
No, I thought the Duck of Doom was the one that blows up. I don't remember.
So I was asking, what is an expansion?
Oh, okay.
Oh, so it's additional cards to add on to the game.
Good question.
So it's usually like they don't come in a big thing like this. It's usually like a little like
a little
playing card pack basically. And it usually has like 50 or so cards.
Yeah.
And they just add additional stuff into it. So they update. They'll add in like new jokes basically of like things that have happened recently.
Or if you're just tired of playing with the same cards over and over and over again, they add like new stuff to like fight or game. Yeah. Some of them are new jokes, and some of them are just
of them are just like I think some of the expansions are just an excuse to use like jokes for the title. Like clerical error is my favorite.
That's a great one.
Clerical error.
Yeah.
But like they added new classes, they added new races, they add in like different. Like sometimes they add in like new rules or things that you can add in.
Yeah.
For a long time, I had a Munchkin coin in my wallet that I got from I think I got it during Free RPG Day or something, and it was basically like a get out of jail free card. Like you could, if you brought it out at the table, you could like defeat a monster immediately. Which is very useful. It was like it's a silly they have shirts that they're like if you wear this shirt you gain a free level
and if it's signed by Steve Jackson you gain another benefit. If it's signed by the artist it gains another benefit.
It's really ridiculous.
At home I have the bobblehead, which if you can see it while playing the game you can invoke it to gain a free reroll. Which is fun. So this one's a good one.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to quickly talk about snake oil. This is another, this is definitely appropriate for kids. It's made by Hasbro Great Gaming. I'm looking for an ages on it. It doesn't, it's ages 10 and up. You can play it with slightly younger than that, I think. This is another one that is similar to Fun Employed and Smack Talk Showdown, where you are a traveling salesperson and you are pitching products to a judge. So you have to have 3 people to play, but they're all kinds of silly products, and you've got to figure out how to sell your product to the judge who's, the person who's acting as a judge. So you choose 2 cards, like on the back here, There's you are that's right. Then the customer also gets a role. So the person who you're pitching the product to also gets a role. So in the example that's on the back, you have a caveman, and the objects that you are trying to sell them, if there were 5 people playing, the 4 other people, one is trying to sell the caveman a beard brush, one is trying to sell them stone paint, one is trying to sell them an animal blanket, and one is trying to sell them a snow machine. Now, the funny thing is that these are very like, oh yeah, that would be easy to do, sell a caveman those things. They kind of set it up for you. It would be more likely that you're going to get beard paint and machine blankets. And trying to have to sell that to a caveman would be
I mean,
slightly
I don't know
different.
about you, but I don't like my machinery to be cold. It always jams up.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Tom would be really good at
this.
this game. I wasn't sure about it, and I played with with Jason, my husband, and my son Seth, and we had so much fun that we were crying, laughing, playing this game. And it's a very simple game. It's something that kids can play by themselves. Simple rules, very straightforward, but it does still exercise those creative juices and really kind of get the brain thinking about how to become this character and have excuses and reasons why they need to sell this object to a person.
There's a similar game to that, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically you're playing a pharmaceutical company, and you're trying to you're developing this medicine to counteract these side effects of another medicine.
Yep.
And it's basically a thing, because when you win, your medicine becomes a thing that people are trying to fight against, because some of the side effects are like runny nose, like eye twitches. Some of them are like grows an extra tentacle,
or I think one of them is demon possession.
Yeah,
actually.
and it's we ended up getting like the Cthulhu virus, because it like made you like grow tentacles from your face, and like you became possessed by a demon, and like you got wings, and it was like you were just
I think you also gained like leathery skin.
It was really funny, but like the point is, so you can play it in either teams or you can play it individually.
Okay.
And if you're in teams, one person has all of like the side effects in their hand that they have to like play, and the other person has to be the pharmaceutical rep who's pitching it to doctors.
Right. So basically, one of you is marketing, and the other one is the scientist in the background, just going, by the way, watch out for this thing.
Yeah. So like you're playing things, and you're like, I have to play this. I'm sorry. And they're like, I don't know how I can pitch, a disease that turns like a medicine that turns you into Cthulhu to counteract pink eye. Like, why?
Yeah.
So it's
really
it's really
fun.
a
really fun one.
And I wish I could remember the name of it.
We'll find it. We'll put it in the.
That is
It's
a
Bad Medicine.
Oh,
Yes.
that
Okay.
sounds like fun. I'm going to have you talk about Forbidden Island.
Oh, Forbidden Island. I prefer Forbidden Desert, but Forbidden Island I think is the better one to start with.
Yeah.
So Forbidden Island is you are a team of adventurers, or is it archaeologists or scientists? I forget. You're basically Indiana Jones and his team. And you're on this island that's kind of implied to be like Atlantis or something.
Yeah.
It's like a mystical island that appeared, and you're there to find these artifacts. You have to find 4 artifacts and then get off the island, because the island is slowly sinking.
Sometimes not so slowly.
So it has this kind of modular game board. I don't know if you can see it, but there's little like tiles that you put down, and they put down in a different order every game. And then you can flip them over to show that they're sinking. So they become kind of blue, like they're underwater. And you can shore them up to flip them back over and make sure they don't sink. Because if one of them sinks while you're on it, you drown, I think.
Yeah,
I think
You have to swim.
Yeah, I think you get 1 chance to swim.
And then if one of them sinks with the artifact on it, it's like lost.
It's gone. Yeah.
But there's two sides where you can get each artifact. But it's really fun because like you have to. It's a teamwork game because you're playing against the board, so you really have to like kind of get into it. Each character has, I think in this one, each character has different
attributes.
Abilities,
yeah. So everyone has different abilities. Some of them are better at like there's one that can like swing across the map, or something.
There's
like
one
that.
that can go diagonal. Most of them only move orthogonally.
Yeah.
So
there's all of these different like characters you can kind of play, and kind of get into like making sure that you escape from this island and get everything that you need. Forbidden Desert is very similar to it.
Yeah.
I think it's a little more unforgiving.
Oh yeah.
There's a sandstorm that kind of moves around the board.
Oh, bye, honey.
And sand builds up on things, and it can bury you basically. And you're looking for you've crash landed in the desert, and you're trying to dig up this ancient flying machine to leave.
Yeah.
and there's like
basically you're building
like,
a scrap helicopter.
and like the
It's
sun,
kind of
like there's
amazing.
this card called like the sun beats down and everyone loses water
Right.
to
Yeah.
the desert.
Right, it's a
and
desert, yeah.
It's a
So
really.
how would you role play with this?
I mean, what I would do is I would encourage kids
Just,
to like when they have a role, like create a
play
character
that role,
for that role,
yeah,
and
yeah.
like because a lot of times you end up talking in this game and in Forbidden Desert, you're like, I think I'm going to go here and do these actions, and then after that I'm going to go here, and then you're going to do this. So I would say while you're having those conversations, instead of just saying like, well, I'm this guy, I'm going to do this, be like, okay, like talk as your character, like,
Yeah, yeah.
oh well, I think the great thing is over here because I'm the archaeologist and I'm going to go dig up this area because I'm much more proficient at this. What you should do, Mr. Helicopter Operator, is fly Mr. Excavator over here so he can assist and do things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
Yeah, you can really because it does teach kids how to have like different attributes
Yeah.
in a game, how to have specific skills that are
working together
specific
and like
to them.
also acknowledging that you don't have the skill to like someone is better than you.
yeah,
I think is a really valuable skill. Like
And you need
recognizing
other
that,
people.
yeah,
Yeah.
recognizing that you may not be the expert, so you have to defer to someone else and say, you know more than me, or you have an ability that works way better than I do.
Right.
You should do this, not me.
so not just Forbidden Island, but most cooperative games
Yeah.
will help teach this, and there's a lot of them
There's
out there.
a lot of them,
Like
Yeah.
if you have older kids, Pandemic is a great one.
Also very
It's
unforgiving, but
you will not win Pandemic. I'm just going to let you know that right now. But there's a ton of them. Pandemic, Forbidden Island, and Forbidden Desert are the three popular ones. That come to
yeah,
mind.
yeah. But they're all very
Castle
good for that.
Panic is also
Oh,
good.
yeah,
for young
Castle
kids.
Panic's a good one.
Any cooperative games, especially if you've got kids who fight with
Oh,
each
yeah.
other, like mine
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Then giving them an opportunity and kind of space to all have to work together at something is really important. So I'm gonna. Oh, never mind. Okay, all right. I was gonna go help somebody, but they don't want my help. Have you ever played this, Tom?
I have not.
Is
No?
that parsley?
It's Parsley.
Okay.
We kind of know what this is. You can
Okay.
talk about it, right?
Parsley. If you've ever played a old school text-based RPG on the
I was about to say,
computer,
that's what that looks
much
like.
That's
like
what it is, yeah.
much like it's Zork.
Zork,
Um,
Adventure. Those are the two popular ones.
Yeah,
I
If
know.
you're
even like-
old,
Yes, it's one of
Like
it's the
me.
old school, like like you find yourself in this place. Like directions are northeast and
Oh, yeah,
Venice.
there are
you know, like-
exits to northeast and Dennis.
yeah. So what this is a live action, like in-person version of that.
right?
So everyone plays a
I
character,
have heard of
and
Yeah, so
and
fun.
the GM
We
basically
should
just
do this. We
narrates
should have a
this.
night that we do
We
this. 'cause
should.
it was
and
really fun to do.
and so you can say like there's certain abilities that you have, and there's certain like certain things like that, like for example, like crashed plane. You wake up to find yourself buckled into the pilot's chair of a crashed airplane. Through the cockpit window, you can see dense jungle foliage. There's a backpack here. So like someone would be like, oh, like I look in the backpack.
and then
and-
it has
but,
but
like,
to what to do.
The person who's like running the game kind of has to be like the computer and be like, oh, I don't understand what you said, because you have to find the right words to talk
Right.
to them and like figure things out, and you can be
That's-
like, oh, like where are the like I look around the room and you can be like, oh, like there are exits here, like this one is exit the airplane.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But like in this one, you have to unbuckle
Hey, I'll tell you
yourself.
what.
Like,
If we
it's really
play
fun.
this together,
Well,
We
we'll
should.
live
Yeah.
video
Oh
it
my
so that
God.
and
you
like
guys
and there's
can
a
see
little
how
there's
it
a little
plays.
map, and like the illustrations and the like
It's very
really,
simple, but
really
really compelling.
yeah, really compelling. So like you kind of have to take on the role of, and there's no instructions for building a character, so it's just like, no, like, who are you? This is where you woke up. What kind of person are you?
Mhm.
And how are you going to solve this problem? Of,
And we've
like,
actually
you know.
done this as a live action game. I don't know if you knew that, but we did last summer.
Yeah.
We took the kids into the woods and we used one of these that was castle based, and had them kind of play through it that way, and they were bananas over it. They thought it was just like the greatest thing ever. So so yeah, we will definitely need to do
Yeah.
a future live video to show people how to do this. This is I'll put the link where to find these. There's a bunch of different ones. Would be great for a family game night, or even just to get the kids to do something with
Yeah.
each other. One person plays the computer. The directions are very, very simple. And then even if it's just two kids, him and a
Yeah.
friend, or you know, or a room full. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You can play this and have everybody take turns and have a blast doing it without parent intervention. This is what I'm telling
And like
people.
everything is like, you don't need any experience
Right.
running a sort of role playing game to play this, because all of the instructions are right here, and it gives you like scoring at the end, and like all of just, it's really cool.
super fun.
Yeah,
simple,
and you can kind of get
straightforward.
into character and like talk as the characters. It's really fun.
All right, I'm going to talk really briefly about Above and Below because it's one of my favorite. Do you know Fiasco?
I do.
You can
I
talk
love
about
this one.
Fiasco.
I wanted to.
You were so excited about talk. I love how excited you are.
Yeah.
I'm basically a big kid,
Yeah.
so it's fine.
All right, I'm going to talk about Above and Below, which Allie and I have put together, and I've helped run it for a couple of different people. It is such a beautiful game. Now, this game, if you've got astute children, they could play this by themselves, or once they've played, they can probably set it up. This recommendation is for ages 13 and up. I think you could probably play it with slightly younger kids.
Yeah, if you were kind of guiding them.
age.
Yeah.
Maybe the first time, and then after that, you know. And there's another game that can be played kind of in conjunction with this called Islebound. But first of all, look at the art. It's so pretty, so pretty.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I wanted to show you guys this game is that it's got a really, really interesting mechanic where as you play through the game, and it does, you know, if you're not somebody who plays a lot of tabletop role-playing games, you might get a little overwhelmed by the setup. I really suggest you watch a video on how to set this up. My favorite, very methodical YouTuber who does a lot of like how to play is Watch It Played. My husband can't stand watching him because he's so like, and now you're going to do this. And now you're going to do this, which I need, but drives Jason absolutely bananas.
I thought you were talking about the slightly dissociated computer voice of like, computer, how do I play this game?
No,
first you are going to set it up.
No, he's I like him. I really do, because he's cheerful, and he's very methodical, and he shows you every little thing about how to set it up kind of step by step, which I really appreciate and I really need, but you know, it's not Jason's jam, which is fine too. But anyway, so inside, the interesting role-play mechanic that's here in this game is that as you take actions, you'll have a board, you're building a little colony for yourself, both above and below. And that's why it's called Above and Below. So you've got, you've got cards that will be buildings above, and you've got cards that are going to be building below. And as you take actions, you make choices about what your character is going to do. But the interesting and fun mechanic about it is that as you do, someone has to read you what happens when you make your choice. So it's very much like a very simple kind of introductory role-playing game with some other mechanics involved.
There's choices you need to make, and
kind
of very similar to Parsley in that it's you have a couple of choices you have to make, and depending on what they are, they either can lead you deeper into the story, or they can say, oh, you missed it, so now you have to leave.
Right. Like here's an example. You hear a dreadful digging and sniffling sound ahead, a noise suggesting both hunger and complete comfort in total darkness. The sound somehow succeeds in being deeply disconcerting and oddly endearing all at once. Come on, that's great,
I
right?
go pet the creature.
Yeah. Right. So then you have choices. You can run and hide, or you can overcome your dread and approach cautiously. So those are your choices, and then you would give that person their choices.
Oh,
and you have to
this is such a good game.
like resources to do some of these things, because it's like, oh, well, you have to spend like endurance, or you have to spend like money sometimes to like buy things from mysterious merchants that appear in the underworld. So it's fun. Really interesting.
So fun.
Really fun.
Love
really
this
fun.
game, and it's beautiful. So so that is that one. And then I'm going to let you talk about Fiasco, and then we'll briefly talk about some traditional role-playing games. We should talk about No Thank You Evil. We'll tell you a little bit about Quest, and then we'll wrap things
I'd
up.
also like to bring up the Sherlock game. But
You talk about that.
So first, I'm going to talk about this one. So this is called Fiasco. The cover art, it perfectly explains how this game is played.
Yes.
This one I would definitely recommend a slightly older group of teens, probably, I'd say, 15 up, 14 up?
Yeah. It's a little. The themes are a little more mature.
Yeah.
You can make it as light as you want. There's actually a like supplement to this
Mm-hmm.
that is a little more like 16 Candles versus Fargo.
But either way, so this game is essentially, this is basically a miniature role-playing game with very few rules. Most of the setup time for this is actually going to be setting up the relationships between you and the other people at the table. This plays best with about 4 to 5 people. That's what we found through rigorous testing on camping trips.
Yeah,
And
don't play it. It says maximum 6 people. You can play it with more. Probably not a good idea. It gets very confusing
and very
you have to
long.
Very long.
But
you're already
essentially,
talking like a 2-hour commitment
Yeah.
with just like 4 people. The more people you add in, the more time it's going to take to set up the game and then actually play through
But
it.
so the way it works is that I, as a player, if the 3 of us were playing, there's no GM, there's no like person who's removed from the game. But I then have a relationship with Allie here, and that might be that we're family or that we're family criminals who are working as a part of the gang. And then I have a relationship with Kristen where it turns out we're also both on the police force. So, and then she and Allie also have a relationship. So then you kind of go around the table and you use those relationships to guide what happens. Everything is dice-based. You're going to need a large collection of 6-sided dice or Monopoly dice for you non-gamers.
In 2 colors.
Preferably in 2 colors.
Definitely in 2 colors.
It can't work otherwise. And what you do is whenever it's your turn in the game, you pick a person at the table to have a scene with. So, for example, Allie and I might have a scene in which, we start talking about our attempt to, say, rob the evidence locker at my job, but I can't get caught because I can't lose my job because my wife is going to, go into surgery soon. And then as that scene kind of develops, people who are not in the scene award dice based on how they think the scene is going to play out. And so, if I mention we'll do it at a time when nobody's going to expect it, like in the middle of the day, broad daylight, while everyone's out on patrol, someone could be like, I think that's going to end poorly because all the cops are going to be there.
It's more the scene will end poorly for you because you're talking about actually you're playing out scenes in like a heist movie, or like the example is like Fargo, any Coen Brothers movie, really. And it's supposed to things aren't supposed to go well.
No.
Midway through the game, once everyone's gotten a scene, there's this thing called the tilt, which is where something goes wrong. And the person
or something is alluded to about to be going on.
Yeah, so the person with the most black dice and the most white dice basically get to pick the thing that goes wrong. And then you all have to do the scenes again and show how this tilt is affecting you.
Right.
And then in the end, you take all of your dice and you roll them, and you total up the number that you've rolled with black dice subtracting from the white dice, and you get your ending. And so you have to then go around the table and kind of narrate what happens to your character. Some of them die in the ensuing fire, or some of them lose their job and their wife
better
dies.
for older
and
kids.
Some of them get away with it. But it's very rare for that.
We have some great stories from this game. One of my favorite ones is the one where we had just killed the lich in the basement of a D&D game.
Dragon Slayers is the playset.
And so my character, who is the trust all fighter, basically everyone's we need to get this cursed sword away from the kid or else he's going to murder everyone in the party.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, my character's over here just hey, does anybody want this robe? I kind of want the robe. So and then my character ended up living it. She ended up becoming a new skin saw man.
We're the only 2 that lived, and I ended up becoming a serial killer because I picked up the weapon when my brother died. It was very complicated, but it was really fun. So you kind of have to get into character. You have to come up with a name.
Have to get into
you have to come up with a bunch of relationships.
Right.
You have to
and then act through.
And then act it. You have to act it out. Yeah. So it's a great, if you've never played a role playing game, it's a really great way to kind of get into the mindset of it without having to worry about really rolling dice or having stats or having any sort of thing that isn't just words on a paper that says I am I'm trying to think of ones that we've done.
Well, Allie and I were. What was it? You were the secretary in one of them for Joe.
Yes.
Joey Elbows.
Yeah, Joey Elbows.
And then I ended up being, I think
Mr. Elbow Stein.
Yeah. But anyway, like you get very little other
Yeah.
than like you and I are again like members of a criminal organization, and she and I are police officers.
Yeah. So stuff like
um,
that, and you have to kind of come up with motivations for things
Yeah.
and stuff on the fly, and you're kind of acting out like these very like kind of stereotypical characters, and then you can kind of throw loops into things. It's really fun.
So
Definitely recommended.
the other thing too is that it's great because you don't really have to worry about the consequences too much, because like you might the first time you play it, but like after the first game you're like, oh, everybody dies in the end no matter
pretty
what.
much. So like,
I'm just gonna go full ham.
and it's fun sometimes to be like, oh no, like I'm playing someone who's just gonna die at the end,
Yeah.
or like, and then in the end you roll your dice, you're like, oh, I actually got away.
That's
How
what
did
happened with
How
me.
did I get away?
Yeah.
How did this happen? And so you really have to think about, like, you're creating a story, really.
Yeah.
You're creating a movie.
And that's
And
really what
it's-
role playing is. It's
Yeah,
storytelling.
You're telling a
creating
communal story
stories.
with everyone, and it's really fun.
Oh, good, you brought it.
I did, yeah. So so we all love this game.
Oh,
This
yes.
is a great
This is
game.
called Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. We played it at Thanksgiving a couple of years ago.
Yes,
Oh my god,
we have to play more of it.
we do. I thought you were going to bring it this Thanksgiving, but I won't.
I
So
thought
Sushi
people
Go.
were, so I was worried that some of our family might be a little overwhelmed by the games that we brought. So I tried to bring things that were more for the average person. Although, that's not to say things like Fiasco. So, okay, so here's my 2 cents on this. I think that as we get older, we talk ourselves out of being able to try new things and enjoy new things. And I think that sometimes when people look at role-playing or role-playing games, they think, oh, I could never do that. My brain doesn't work that way. And you would be very, very surprised. And that's why I wanted to show you some things like Snake Oil and Fun Employed, because it's a great way to kind of, get exercise your brain and give you the confidence to jump into something else. I think your kids would be able to jump into most of these without too much support and effort, because their brains are just more flexible and they still believe in magic. So it's easier, I think, for them. But I think that it's not that as an older human that we can't do these things. I think we tell ourselves that we can.
Mhm.
And so we're not willing to try because we're afraid of failing. But really, anybody can play any of these games fairly easily. You might need a little bit of support. You might need to go look at a video. But I highly encourage you to do that because you're missing out on a ton of fun. And they're great ways to get the kids off the computer, get yourself off the cell phone.
And a lot of these games take hours to play.
Mhm.
So you could have a whole evening of just playing, Sherlock Holmes or Fiasco or
Right.
like D&D or Pathfinder or something like that, because
Or you can
And
take 20 minutes and
you
play
will
Snake
never
Oil.
find kids more engaged in a story
Right.
when they can affect that story.
Oh, yeah.
So we play role-playing games with kids as young as 5 or 6,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and they will sit there and play the game and want to play the
Oh,
game.
and they are
And-
adamant
Yeah.
about
And
certain
we're talking about
things with
kids
their
that will
character.
not sit still for 5 minutes.
Right.
They will want to keep playing after an hour is gone.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll
And-
talk about that more in a minute.
Yeah.
Let's quickly kind of go through what Sherlock Holmes. You should probably pull out the map and
Yes,
stuff
yes,
so
yes.
people can see.
So to kind of give the prefix to this, you are one of Sherlock Holmes's street gang consultant people. I forget what they're called.
The Baker Street Irregulars.
Yeah, the Baker Street Irregulars. And essentially every time you sit down, there's a certain number of
Yes, yeah.
scenarios. There's a certain scenario you're supposed to do. And every time you complete one of these scenarios, it kind of leads into the next one. And essentially you're just trying to solve the mystery of who murdered the guy in charge of the manufacturing plant, or all these things. And it
Yeah.
leads you all
So-
throughout London.
So you have this big map. I'm going to try to not tear it when I open it.
Oh, I didn't realize it was double-sided.
I don't think so. This is
one
a
is-
deluxe version
yeah.
that I got.
I think the back is the expansion.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, it could be, yeah.
So you have this giant map of London, and I'm not sure if it's totally obvious, but there are numbers all over the place that are marking different buildings and their street names. And when you're playing the game, you actually have to find people at these places with pretty much no direction,
Yeah.
except for this, which is the London directory. And the
And a
directory,
case file.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on for a sec.
Yeah.
So the London directory is literally just
A list.
It's
It's
a
a phone
list
book.
of
It's a phone
people
book.
and places and the place where you can find them.
One
Like,
of my
you know, like you could look up Michael O'Loughlin. He's at 66 East area, East C, East Center. Yeah, so he's up
Yeah.
here, and that's where you can find him. And when you're actually playing the game, you have like a booklet that has, you know, things to read off when you get to a certain area, and you just look up, you know, 66 EC, and that will tell you what you find at that place in that particular scenario. And every scenario is different, but they build off each other.
Mhm.
So you could be like, oh wait, I remember in the first one we played
Yeah.
that this guy wasn't actually here; he was here. Let's go here instead.
But there's
You can also have a category. There's a category
Yeah.
list where it's like, oh, you know, like one of the games we played, we needed to find someone, a tobaccoist.
yeah.
So they actually have like tobacconists and inns and like
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And
So
and
if
where
you
can
miss
find
your
them.
phone book, play this game.
Yes, this will give you a
It's-
lot of feels like that.
The-
And additionally, there's
Oh,
also
yeah.
the times for each. There's one for each date that the game happens on, and my favorite part is that the previous date, like the previous newspapers, are all relevant to every
Yeah.
like next one. So I think there's 10
Yeah.
different scenarios in here, and they build off each other. So you can go back to like the first times and hi Gillian, and actually go in and like find something that you may have missed, and
Or that just wasn't relevant at
yeah,
the time.
and like you kind of have to read the whole thing because then you're like,
Really
wait,
do.
like
Yeah.
like what's
so they'll
happening in
so
London?
if you're playing this with your kids and you want to get them some research skills,
Yeah.
and some
so good for that.
investigation skills, you know, some critical thinking skills, you know, they've got to kind of
Yeah.
figure out what's relevant and what's not.
Yeah.
Great
And
game.
like you're trying to, because you're not playing Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is like, I kind of understand what's happening,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna let you guys figure it out because like I want to see how you do it.
Yeah, he
so
pulls-
you're basically racing Sherlock Holmes to get to the answer. And in the end, it gives you a score based on like you have to answer these questions, and it gives you a score based on how you answer them. And then it has like Sherlock Holmes narrate how he did it, and you're just like, oh, like that jerk. How did he
Yeah.
do it so quickly? How did he know how to go there? Like it took
if
us
you
7 steps to find this guy, and he did it in 1.
Right.
How did he do that? And it kind of forces you to think more like Sherlock Holmes and like kind of get into that mindset of like, whoa,
Yeah.
like everything has a meaning. And sometimes it's like, nope, that didn't have a meaning at all. That was a red herring.
Yeah.
yeah.
And you followed up on it, and now you wasted 10 like time periods
Right.
looking at that. And it's so funny.
If you've ever read the Sherlock Holmes books and you were like, God, Sherlock Holmes is such a jerk. Why does Watson put up with him? This will not answer that question,
Yeah.
but it will make you sympathize with him a lot more.
Yeah, and it's very good at getting the tone of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
And the thing I love about it too is that like you're like, okay, we need to find out who murdered this guy, and you're pretty much given, you have to come up with all of the like the motivation for it. You have to say,
Right.
okay, well, I guess we'll examine the crime scene now. I guess we'll go and talk to the witnesses. Like, who was this guy? We have known nothing about this guy.
Yeah.
You have to kind of research yourself and figure out who it is, and then read the paper and find if his name is in there, or
Yeah.
figure out if
Lots of-
someone
so-
didn't like
so
him,
good.
and it just
Such a good game.
It's-
and like it's very
It also does like a really good job of like the like really good mystery authors like
Yeah.
Arthur Conan Doyle and like Agatha Christie of like giving you a lot of logical pathways that only one of them ends up being true, even
Yeah.
though like for half of the game that we played, I was dead certain it was another guy, and then somebody else did something, and I was like, well, there goes my entire theory.
yeah
Like
yeah,
that
yeah.
just
Yeah.
ruined
And-
everything.
And it's
it's-
cooperative.
yeah,
It's a great
and
game.
it's where's the
It's over here.
Yeah.
and it's
Highly recommend it.
Yeah,
This is another
very-
one we should play and
Oh, yeah.
film.
oh
some.
absolutely, it would take like forever, but
Yeah.
but it's fun. It's so much fun.
The other cool thing about this is that it doesn't have a time limit. Like
Yeah.
there's no time pressure on it whatsoever.
and you can put it away and like pick it back up.
yeah.
It encourages taking notes.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Because there's
Another skill.
you have to remember what's happening. So it really encourages a lot of like it's good. It's great for teaching research
It is.
Yeah.
and like reading for content and critically thinking. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is.
And
one of my
like
favorites.
there's a lot of talking between people in this game, much like there is in Munchkin or Fiasco. So there's a lot of opportunity to basically say like, okay, well, I'm actually playing Barnaby Weathersby, the son of a rich duke who it pretends to be one of the like lower class that he can be on. So he can be a part of Sherlock Holmes's team because, and then like just go with it from there.
And the other thing I really like too is that as a person who loves Sherlock Holmes and has read a lot of the stories, sometimes you read them and you're like, how did he figure this out? Like he's always so smug about the fact that like, oh, I knew it was happening like miles before anyone else. And it really kind of explains for you how his logic works.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of like, oh, like I finally understand.
Yeah.
Like he makes these logical leaps but they make sense because you're like, I could have done that. I could have thought logically about it and been like, you know what, I should have just followed up on this thing instead of doubting myself. Like Sherlock Holmes just has no doubt. He's just like, nope, this is how it is and this is what I'm going to do. And so it kind of humanized Sherlock Holmes a little bit more for me.
Yeah.
Because suddenly he wasn't this like, person who just, can't, no one can achieve him. And then like I played a game once or one of the games where I was like, oh, like I was narrating a game and they got very close to like beating him. And I was like, it's possible to beat him, but you have to be like really, you have to be honest. You have to go into it being like, we're going to do it. And like, you can't you can't fool around. And it's motivating to me, I think.
Also, when he gives his descriptions, you will never want to punch the person reading Sherlock Holmes more than in that moment because you're like, oh, I called it from the beginning, but I didn't think that was right. And it was just so it's aggravating, but in that like really fun way.
Oh yeah.
So talk about real quick how to if you've got a family watching who their kid wants to get into Dungeons and Dragons, like what is or is there a better like introductory tabletop role playing game that you would recommend?
there are a lot. Well, okay. To get
5th edition D&D, which is the current edition of D&D, is actually very easy to get into.
Yeah.
One of the things that I can recommend is almost every role-playing game has a beginner box. And the ones for D&D 5th edition, Pathfinder, even the ones for like the new Star Wars RPG, they're all really good, and I totally recommend buying them. They come with pre-made characters, but they also come with additional character sheets. They come with a little kind of pseudo player's handbook that will tell you about the characters and like what they can do and how to kind of build a first level character. They come with dice usually, so you don't have to go and like figure out what kind of dice. You'll actually get a set of polyhedral dice. They come with an adventure to run. Sometimes they come with miniatures, our map. So
most of them usually come with tile maps.
Yeah, like either a tile map or like a big like paper grid map. Totally recommend doing that if you've never played anything. They really go into kind of explaining how to play a role playing game. But the other thing you can do is you can just go and pick up like the core book. Usually, if you walk into like a game store and say I'm looking for like the core book to Pathfinder or the core book to D&D 5th edition, they'll be able to direct you to the thing that you should buy. With games like a game like Pathfinder, which is when did it come out? 6 years ago?
Longer than that, I think.
7 years ago. Pathfinder is
just after 4th edition. Yeah,
so Pathfinder is to not get too into it. There was a 3rd edition and a 4th edition, a 5th edition of D&D. A lot of people really liked 3rd edition D&D, and so this group called Paizo basically was like, oh, like we're just going to take those rules and like make our own setting and make up some more new rules for it and refine it and kind of make it a little better. And that's what Pathfinder is. So it's related to D&D, but it's not exactly the same anymore. There are dozens of books for Pathfinder, and it can be very overwhelming to walk into a store and see this big rainbow lineup of books. And
it actually is a rainbow, by the way. It's actually
it is. You're like, I don't even know what I need to buy to run this game. Like, do I need dice? Like, do I need miniatures? What do I need for this? So a beginner box is actually a really good investment, I think.
That is
and
true.
then it'll tell you, if you want to know more about this, go buy this book. If you like this thing, go buy this book. Another great resource is just the internet. If you sometimes if you go onto like Reddit or even just like the forums for like a particular game, they'll have like, are you a new player? This is the best place to start. And you can sometimes ask questions and they'll kind of go into it. The role playing community is a lot more welcoming than it used to be. It used to be that like in the early days of the internet and all that kind of stuff, it was very difficult to get into this stuff if you didn't have a friend who already knew how to play it. because a lot of them were a little bit, they were very rules heavy and very kind of unwelcoming.
Yeah.
And you'd
Well,
have to like find these like
even-
little corners of the internet where like role players hung out, and if you didn't like walk in and be like, oh, I know what I'm doing, they'd just like be like, you don't know what you're doing,
Well,
go away, like you're a
so-
noob and we don't like you.
So a great example of this is that they reprinted the AD&D rules, and when you take a look at the AD&D rules for Dungeons and Dragons, the damage values for weapons and spells are not dice.
Yeah,
Like,
they're not a
normally-
dice range. Usually it's like, oh, you roll an 8-sided die
and then
add this number.
It's all just like you do 2 to 5 damage,
Mhm.
and then you kind of have to parse. Oh, that's a D4 with a +1,
Yeah.
and that one's really simple. But then you get into other things like the range here is 3 to 18 to 17, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah,
it
how many?
gets, like,
What do I have to roll for this?
yeah.
So it was very like kind of, it was
arcane is what it really was.
yeah, and it's rooted in wargaming, which is
Yeah.
also a very difficult hobby to get into if you've never played it.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot. It's almost like there's like gatekeepers who are making sure that you're like savvy enough to
Nerdy enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is really annoying.
Now, I will say it's a lot more open. People are more willing to do that. There are a lot more RPGs on the market. And
So is there a simpler one for kids who want to get into fantasy that are maybe not like No Thank You Evil level, but maybe a little step
Yeah,
higher?
I would probably recommend Fate and Numenera as the two to kind of go into. So Fate is a really, really simple system. It does use a specialized dice system, but they're all basically just pluses, minuses. You add them all together, add a number, and then that's your.
And
your
the cool thing about Fate is that they have printable dice that you can actually like
Mhm.
build out of paper, which is cool. But they also have this thing called the Fate deck, which you can buy as a deck of cards, and they show you how to do it with a regular deck of cards too, I believe.
Mhm.
And it basically is just it's a different way to randomize.
Yeah.
Um,
Numenera is.
that's all the
one.
dice are. When we're
Yeah.
talking about dice in a role playing game, they're a randomization thing. It's
Yeah.
like when you're playing a video game and you swing and you miss, and then you swing again and you hit. It's extrapolating that into something physical.
Yeah.
So.
I've actually seen people who have just bought decks of cards to use for D10 systems.
Yeah.
Numenera is another good one. That's a great one because it literally only requires 2 dice. The system is really weird where if you have a kid who's like, I want to play something like sci-fi, and they have another kid who's like, I want to play something fantasy. This is a nice like merger of the two because you play like say wizards, but they're really people who can manipulate nanomachines or like anything like that.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
The setting is a little weird.
It's very weird.
It's actually it was the first game in what's called the Cypher system, which might be an easier place to start. The Cypher system is basically a generic system. It's D20 based, but it's not a D20 system, which seems a little confusing, but it relates to D&D and the open gaming license and that kind of stuff. It's written by Monty Cook, who is one of the developers for D&D 3rd edition, which is one of the most successful versions of D&D. So he's directly like responsible for a lot of the stuff that was good about that, and conversely, all of the rest of role playing in general. He's a cool guy too. So he came up with this kind of weird sci-fi fantasy setting.
Yeah.
It's super
Science
cool.
fantasy.
I'm really into like bizarre and strange role playing games. So I thought it was really cool. But some people might be a little put off by that. But if you look up the Cypher system, they have other games in it, including No Thank You Evil, which is a great game if you have really young kids.
Yeah.
It's very fantasy based. It's like story tale based almost, or fairy tale. And it's great for kids. They really get into it. It's super easy to
So
like.
she's talking about No Thank You
talking to.
Evil, and
Yeah.
we actually run a group here on Mondays, but it'll be switching to Wednesdays.
Yeah.
If you want to come and have your child try it over the summer, No Thank You
Mm-hmm.
Evil. We recommend it for kids, I would say ages 5 to 10 at the most, probably
Yeah, yeah,
5 to 9.
But the
years
cool
old.
thing about it is that if you get it, there's different like difficulty levels of it where you start with it. So the Cypher system uses this thing called I'm a adjective noun that verbs, and you basically fill in those things with like certain traits, and they give you different abilities. So No Thank You Evil does that, but you can basically say you're only playing like a noun. So you can have a kid who's like, I'm playing an astronaut, I'm playing a princess, I'm playing a spy, and they get one ability for that, and they get a little companion creature. And then you can level them up and say, okay, now you get an adjective. And so now they're like, I'm a brave princess, or I'm a crafty spy, or, I'm a silly astronaut. And they get another ability on top of that. And then they add a verb later on, which gives them another ability. And so...
And it's designed so that kids can run it by themselves.
Yeah, and so it's like once a kid kind of levels out of the system and becomes, 11 or 12, and they understand the system and they know it, they can then start running games for like their younger siblings or cousins or friends. And it's really a great way to get a kid comfortable with taking on like the game master role. Because the rules are very simple. There's one die, you roll just a little 6-sided die. And it's just, you got a lot of really creative solutions to things.
Right.
So.
So Numenera is the kind of, I don't want to say big boy, like the grown-up version of
it's
that.
not the adult version.
But where like you get a lot more adjectives and a lot more verbs. Like you can be an angry nano who howls at the moon.
Yeah, which is your werewolf.
Favorite ones. Well, I am a werewolf.
I know.
I'm a magical werewolf.
Yes, you're a magical werewolf.
If you're also looking, if you are older and you're in the more like upper teen ranges and you want to play kind of a more like another type of game and like you kind of miss the D&D thing, there's also a lot of the White Wolf systems are kind of simple or more simple.
I would say those are a little more adult though. They deal with a lot more adult themes. Like but that's like modern world, and you're playing like supernatural creatures, so werewolves and vampires and fairies.
Actually, if you're a fan of these supernatural series,
it fits
you can right in with that.
They have hunters. If you're into that, it's really cool. They've started the company that owns the IP now is called Onyx Path, and they've just started re-releasing the old World of Darkness and updating the new World of Darkness, which old World of Darkness started in the 80s?
early 90s?
Late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
It started off with
and
Vampire.
ran until about 2007.
Gehenna happened around 2008 or 9.
Something like that. Then they ended the world, and then they started a new. They basically refined the system a little bit and started a new IP that kind of has the same creatures, but it's a different world. So it's called like the classic World of Darkness is the old one, and then the new World of Darkness is the new one.
And that's what system?
It's the White Wolf system.
White Wolf system. Okay. So we'll have links for all of this for you guys in the notes. And we've got to wrap things up because I think we've got some stuff that's starting soon. But before we do, I do want to quickly just talk about Quest because we're going to start another round of Quest, which is our therapeutic tabletop role-playing game for kids who have who are practicing social skills. So they may have autism, they may have ADHD, they may have nothing and just need to practice those skills. This game is run. It is Allie created the game based on the Fate system, which is super, super simple, and it is always run with the therapist, so it becomes a therapeutic environment. It's a 6-week session, and we're going to start registering for that within the next week or so. I'm just kind of nailing down people's schedules for that. But again, this is a great opportunity. It's in the fantasy world. We kind of base it on, it's inspired by the world of Minecraft. So if your kid is a Minecraft kid, this was a great way for them to kind of role play something that's familiar and get them into the habit of role playing. And so we will, you can watch for registration on our Facebook page and also probably in here. I'll probably post it when you guys are ready. But especially, we developed this with a number of therapists who are helping us make sure that there's a benefit beyond the natural benefits of a role-playing game for kids to play this with us. So it's been developed for therapists so that it's not so overwhelming for them to pick it up and jump in. We won an award and it's now sitting and waiting for us to have time to use the money to create a box set. But soon there will be a box set that anybody can purchase and they can run a game at home, just like Allie was talking about the starter sets for D&D and things like that. We're going to be developing one of those for Quest for therapists and educators and parents too. So that's the future of that. And also we have another round of our adventure programs that are going to be, we have a Saturday adventure program if your kid is interested in role playing and learning how to role play. We have a monthly Saturday adventure. We actually have 2. They're run simultaneously. I know some of you are not from the local area, but someday soon we'll be in your area, maybe sooner than we think. But we have two. One is based again, kind of on Minecraft. We call it Adventure Craft, although it's kind of taken on its own its own thing. And it was originally inspired by Minecraft, but now it's just a great live action adventure program for kids where they play kind of a fantasy creature, but they don't have to, like, we're very rules light in what they have to wear and how much they role play. The kids really get into it. They really love it. Adventure Craft has some combat in it so that the kids can actually use boffers and play and fight creatures.
Boffers, for those not in the know, are foam swords, so like you can actually hit people and it doesn't hurt.
Right. So like a Nerf sword or something like that.
We also have a wide variety of characters, like in the setting, like as players.
Right.
One kid is a Time Lord, one kid is a half mermaid, one kid I think is a park unicorn.
Yeah. They can really be whatever they want. This is for them to play and explore what a live action game is like for them. And then the other program, aside from Adventure Craft, that we have on Saturdays once a month is called Fairy Tales. And it's probably Allie and my favorite program.
So much.
And it's for younger kids or for kids who are not into the combat, but they still want to role play and they want to practice social skills, or you want them to practice their social skills. This is a really good opportunity. They're role playing fairy human shapeshifters. This was inspired by a game called Golden Sky Stories, which is another tabletop role playing game, but we're from Japan. So those crazy Japanese, they're playing something like they're called henge is what they're called, but for our
based
purposes,
off of the traditional henge yokai,
right? So it's
shape-shifting spirits.
Shape-shifting spirits.
They have animal forms and they have human forms.
So in our world in America, we're just calling them fairies. And it's Fairy Tales, Tails, but we also use inspiration from fairy tale, classic fairy tale stories to get them to role play. So they basically solve problems with their cuteness and friendship.
Yes,
that's literally what happens.
And
so great.
It is so much fun.
It's so much fun.
And the kids have a blast with it. And some of them wear animal ears. And they're just having a ball, just helping the people of the land of Y and come together and be
and they
and
there's crossover between Adventure Craft and Fairy Tales, so like
they
help each other out, and the fairies can go visit their town and meddle in their stuff, and it's really
so
cute.
Fun.
Absolutely. Well, actually last time I got to play Grum the Big Bad Wolf, and we basically played out Little Red Riding Hood. And it was absolutely adorable because like the first thing that happens is the kids like walk up to me and I'm trying to be like this giant intimidating like wolf thing. They're just like, "Hi, Mr. Wolf, would you like some food?" I'm like, "Oh, that was the trigger for my cuteness." Okay.
So it's really fun, and we will have another one on July 14th. Oh, someone's asking, what is it called? Quest is just Quest Therapeutic Adventure Game. And that's a tabletop role-playing game that will be starting next month. And then Adventure Craft and Fairy Tales, the next one will be July 14th, and then it's each month after that. And then we're hoping to have another adventure weekend in October sometime before we do our Eagles Claw event. But we've got lots and lots of programs and things that help kids to exercise that part of their brain and kind of get into role playing. If you're in the New England area and you want us to bring something to you, you should contact us or contact your library or community center or school and have them hire us to come and run a program for you. We've worked with it and lots of different community centers and tons of libraries with our living literature programs that just really kind of help kids, have fun and be kids and play and really role play together. But role playing is a really, really great way for kids to learn a ton of different kinds of skills. We highly, highly recommend it. And if you ever have any questions about, hey, my kid's into this, what should they play? Just give us a shout, contact us. We're happy to help. We've got a lot of different programs that we run here in store, like No Thank You Evil. We've got a Pathfinder Society night. We've got a Dungeons and Dragons night. And Wednesdays are always free if you want to just come in and meet with us and chat. And if we're not in your area yet, like I said, we may be soon. So just hold on and hopefully we will be able to bring some of this programming to you.
Also, if you think you're too old for role playing, in my Pathfinder Society group, I have a guy who's 52 years old, just role playing.
Yeah.
So you're not
great.
too old.
No,
You're never too old.
You're not too old.
Never.
All right. Well, thanks so much, guys, for watching. I hope that you found some of this useful. I will put all of the information into the comment section somewhere. I'll do kind of a list, or I'll upload a document or something to the page so that you guys can see that. And if you enjoyed this, please let us know. Like our page, share with others. We're trying to build this community and kind of bring you things that are, that are of value to you. So, also let us know if there's something that you want to know about specifically. I know we're doing a lot with tabletop games because that's kind of our wheelhouse, but we're willing to talk about other things. And I think I'm going to be putting out a schedule of kind of the next interviews that I'll be having with different people and the types of conversations that we're going to be having together. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you. Everybody's saying thank you. Thank you. Bye, guys.
It's the Facebook.
How do I end it? I don't know how to end it.
I don't know either.
It's underneath that notification.
Aha. That's why. Bye, guys. Thanks. Have a great week.